My name is Tim Weber. I'm a co-founder of Diverso Energy. We are you can almost think of us as a Con Edison of the geothermal space. We founded our company about 5-6 years ago, and the idea is, I've been in the industry 15 years, the geothermal industry, and recognized about 5-6 years ago that there's this huge roadblock in the way as far as mass adoption of the technology. And there's two major hurdles. One, first cost. Second is the risk and complexity associated with the technology. So the idea was to create a company that eliminates those hurdles and potentially allowing for mass adoption, not with the early adopters or the demonstration projects, but how do we attract the other 98% of the market, the business as usual, standard developers that are putting up multifamily condos, apartments, and office buildings. Over the last 6 years, I've spent a lot of time with developers. That's who we're with almost every day. And we've asked a lot of questions. And the idea was, what keeps these folks up at night? What drives their decisions? What causes stress? What are the issues they have with their projects? And going through that process, we learned very quickly that technologies like geothermal are a huge challenge for folks in the building space for a variety of reasons. And some of the pressures that they're facing right now are pretty significant. I think as a society, it's easy to sort of villainize the developers or demonize the developers as just being greedy, risk adverse, they're only in it for themselves. But the reality is when you take a step back and you understand their business model, you realize that, I'll be honest, I'm not even sure I would have the risk tolerance or the stomach to be in that industry. It's extremely difficult, margins are being squeezed, and change is a challenge for them for a variety of reasons. And now you've got New York State's promoting the electrification of buildings. That's no longer business as usual. Gas moratorium obviously creates a huge challenge for developers in Westchester County, especially with high-rise buildings. Doing nothing, no longer an option, obviously. Construction costs, and that's something I've learned a lot about. Developers, the decisions aren't made by them. They've got finance partners, equity partners, a variety of lenders. There's all kinds of interest groups that are involved in these projects that are driving decisions. And construction costs keep changing, labor costs go up, development charges go up, taxes go up, and their margins are being squeezed. If you knew what actual net margins were on a multifamily building or a condo, I think you'd be quite surprised and very understanding why it's hard for them to adopt new technology, especially when now they've been told the way you've been doing this for 20 years is no longer an option. Figure it out. How does any new technology find a role in this type of a business model? Like I mentioned, the pro formas on projects are being squeezed. 10-11% is the new norm for return on a condo. Well, that can erode very, very quickly, especially when you start taking on new, riskier technologies. The other challenge developers have is they need buy-in from all partners, whether it's the architect, the engineer, the structural engineer, the lender, their equity partners, their other investors in the project. Everyone needs to buy in on these new technologies. If they don't have buy-in, that creates chaos, it creates conflict, it creates risk, and it creates headaches. That's a non-starter for any developer. They have enough headaches. They don't need to add more to their plate. They'd like to take things off of their plate. Construction delays, anything that potentially produces a construction delay, again, non-starter. Delays are extremely costly on a $100 million building. Architects have challenges too. They're also being forced to adopt new technologies and look at new, building codes, sustainability, low energy, low carbon. How do you roll that into business as usual design? That's also a challenge. Architects are businesses too. They have to be priced competitively. There's a market out there. They awarded a project based on a price. They have to make a profit. The minute they have to adopt change in the template they have that works for them from a financial standpoint, how do you roll in new technologies, keep your same template and be profitable and be competitive in the marketplace? Their clients want big windows. Energy requirements require punched windows. As an architect, how do you manage that? It's a huge challenge. Opposing conflicts or opposing interests. The architect and what the consumer wants, and what the building code is asking for. So who and what drives decisions during construction? Again, I think another misunderstanding when it comes to developers that they're being greedy or they don't want to introduce new technologies, but ultimately I think it's the lenders that are driving decisions. The lenders give a developer a ceiling. This is a thick black line, you cannot go over this. We give you a loan based on a loan to value, the value is this, therefore your construction financing is that. And it's basically figure it out. And the developer goes down to the consultants and says, figure it out. Put this Rubik's Cube together, here's your budget, here's what I want it to look like, make it happen. So, why don't we see widespread adoption of geothermal? Well, obviously that was a bit of a rhetorical question based on what we've just seen. But I believe the two major hurdles, capital cost and complexity and risk. So this is where, when we created Diverso as a company, the idea is how do we remove these two major issues, capital cost and risk. The third-party ownership model, whoever is doing it, obviously you're taking away that capital cost, but by only removing the capital cost, it's kind of like offering someone half of $100 bill. Financing can take care of that. The other issue is it needs to be off balance sheet because it can't impact their ability to borrow. The lender doesn't see it as debt, so you have to create a true off balance sheet third-party operating expense, so CapEx to OpEx. The other thing is taking on the responsibility of the performance. Geothermal, it's a tricky technology. As robust as it is, there's no shortage of horror stories out there. Ask any mechanical engineer, any developer, they've heard all the stories. Unfortunately, the technology takes it on the chin. Usually it's just lack of management. 20, 25-story buildings, they're typically cooling dominant, more heat going into the ground than what's coming out. That has to be managed during design, during operation, so somebody needs to take responsibility for that technology long term, and that's part of the third-party ownership model, is taking responsibility. Benefit to the architect, get rid of the cooling tower off the roof. The rooftop can now be used for amenity space, increases marketability, potential value in the building. So geothermal is not just about energy savings. We see it more as a real estate play than energy, but it works for both. Benefits to the developer, typically we actually reduce construction cost. Getting rid of the cooling towers, boilers, that's a capital cost avoidance. We pay for the bore field. Technically, they should be saving money on construction. You get a green building, a green roof, or amenity space. In some cases, we have projects where we're from in Toronto. Because of geothermal, they were able to add another floor. So imagine putting in a low-carbon, green-free system, and as a result, you get 25,000 square feet of additional GFA. And not just GFA, the top floor, the cheapest to build, and it's the most expensive or the most valuable to sell. So the financial pro forma on that looks very, very different. It really has nothing to do with energy savings. It has to do with real estate value. Benefits to the condo board. A lot of our projects are condos. We said we're doing this in Toronto. They get simplified budgeting. They get a long-term operating cost that's fixed. Get rid of all the variables, repairs, maintenance, capital reserve for future replacement. That all disappears. 6 variables get replaced with 1 fixed. It makes managing that budget much easier for them. So we've been doing this for a long time. We have hundreds of systems. And I guess my parting message here, if there's any developers in the room or architects in Westchester, you've been hit with a natural gas moratorium. I understand that. But what I want you to understand, we're doing dozens and dozens of these systems in Toronto where there's unlimited access to natural gas. There's no government incentives. The client profile, the developer profile is no different. There's investors, the pro formas are tight, construction costs in Toronto are going up, they're risk adverse, bottom line driven developers, no different than any other developer. The profile is the same, the geology is the same, the climate's basically the same, but unlimited access to gas and no government incentives, and dozens and dozens of developers are utilizing this technology through this business model. So the idea is there's no need to panic. There is a technology and a solution that will actually solve this problem without having an impact on your financial model. And I would argue, based on the incentives that are on the table, will actually improve your finances, not decrease.